Mine's a personal question.
Yep.
Have you read the book Jesus Lived in India? And if so, do you find any truth in it at all, or is it all a whole lot of hocus pocus?
Yeah, no truth in it at all. Sorry.
Right,
Yeah.
thank you.
There is a large school of thought that I lived in India because some of my teachings from the first century seem to have Indian philosophies involved in them. The reality is I learnt all of the teachings that I gave in the first century from God, from my relationship with God, and I actually didn't live anywhere other than Egypt or in Israel in the first century. However, in my sleep state, as can you, we can visit any place on earth. And obviously in my sleep state, I certainly have visited all places on earth. Even in my first incarnation in the first century, I visited other locations. And sometimes that's what they're referring to. But I did not learn from any of those experiences the things that I learnt from my relationship with God.
Yeah, I just found it interesting that there is such a lot of similarities between Christianity and Buddhism, like the Ten Commandments and the precepts for Buddhism, and maybe you could have learnt those from the Buddha. Who knows?
Yeah, the reality is that I also didn't learn from Judaism either. I felt quite differently in my connection with God than the laws of Judaism taught, just as I feel quite differently from what I learnt from God as to what I see in Buddhism and other religious formats. I feel the connection with God is where you learn everything. And that's the primary thing that I'm trying to teach, how to have a connection with God so that you can learn. Does that make sense? So what became Christianity was really a bit of a distortion of what I was trying to do, because what I was trying to do is show people how to have a personal connection with God so that God could teach them individually, not make a whole another set of rules that everyone had to follow and then cause it to become a religion as a result. That was not the underlying intention. Unfortunately, the way mankind is, they always want to make rules because rules simplify things to a degree, because that means that we don't have to make decisions. Because do you see that? Like if society makes a rule for you, then your freedom of choice is taken away from you. And for many of us, we think that's a good thing because that means we're not having to make another choice. And so what we often do is we feel very attracted to religious formats that make rules so that we can avoid making our own choices and decisions and having to pay for them or enjoy them, one of the two. And my feelings are quite strong about that matter. I feel we all need to take personal responsibility for the lack of love in our life or the amount of love in our life, for the lack of truth in our life or the amount of truth in our life. And we need to engage this in a personal way with God. And once we do that, we will learn very rapidly from God. And because God has all truth, you and I will eventually know the same thing. Because like I drew before, if this is God and you and I are working towards God, it makes sense that sooner or later we're going to have the same opinion on certain subjects. Yes? Because we'll have God's opinion, not our own, on all subjects. And that's how I've always taught people to approach their life. And I certainly never taught anybody to approach their life as treating me as their mediator or some kind of intermediary, because I feel all we need to do is know how to have a relationship with God, then we can engage that relationship. Once we can engage that relationship, God can teach us all things that we want to learn. And it will depend totally on our desire as to how rapidly we learn that. Yep. Pleasure.